Assalamu alaikum everybody. In today's presentation, I was planning to focus on task 1 because I know that many people, for many candidates, task 1 is what is problematic, right? And so I wanted to help you guys to address this challenge by focusing on one of the most challenging aspects of task 1, which is writing overviews. So let's get started then. Is task 1 a big obstacle? Yes. For many people, it's a big obstacle because, you see, since we have a chance to obtain breakdowns, I did my research. I did analyze so many breakdowns of my students, of my colleagues, of myself, of my exams. Right? And I noticed that task 1 is what's stopping people from scoring highly in the exam. So let's take a look at some examples of why candidates fail to get a good result in writing. So let's look at the first example. It says listening 9, reading 9, writing 7.5. But if you look at the task 1 results, task achievement 6 and 888. So that means that the guy is a really good writer. If you look at task 2, that's 8.5. That's amazing. Speaking 8.5, that's great. But task 1 task achievement is really low. If you look at the second example, second breakdown, it shows task achievement band 5, coherence, cohesion, band 5 for task 1. But if you look at the reading and listening results, that's band 9 and speaking 8.5, which means that the candidate is really high level. But their task 1 is low. More examples here. Task achievement band 5, but task 2 and speaking, the candidate is really high level. So what do you think are the reasons for a low score given to candidate in terms of task 1? So we have seen very low results like band 4, band 5. So let's see what is the requirement for a high score. If we look at band descriptors and band 4 in task achievement, it says, one of the points say here, few key features have been selected. So that means that as a student, as a candidate, you might not have provided enough key features in the overview to score highly. And another problem can be noticed in band 5, in the highlighted part, which says the inclusion of irrelevant, inappropriate, or inaccurate material in key areas. So key areas in this case is referring to the overview, detract from the task achievement. So that means if you make just one mistake in the overview, for example, instead of saying Asia, you say Central Asia, or instead of saying Asia, you say Russia, then that means that you guys are in big trouble. Why? Because you provided inappropriate or inaccurate material. You might be able to get good results in terms of your lexical resource and grammar, grammatical range and accuracy. However, for task achievement, you will get band 5, no matter how strongly you write your details body paragraphs or your introduction. So I would say overview is the most important paragraph in your entire report. So it should get a lot of attention. But if you look at band 7, one of the requirements reads, it presents a clear overview. The data are appropriately categorized and main trends or differences are identified. You see, that's the primary difference between a band 7 and band 5 task achievement. Overview. Moving on. So if you fix your overview, we have more examples here. More examples. Band 4, task achievement from task 1, band 5, task achievement, band 5, task achievement, band 4. But if you fix those problems, here's what happens. The first example is mine, I believe. Yeah. So if you fix your task 1, you can get 8+. The second example, I believe, is also mine. Yes, when I was given a band 9 for overall and 8.5 for writing. You can see that for task 2, I got 8.5. For task 1, task achievement is 9. So what that means? That means that you need to focus on your overview, and this is what keeps many candidates from getting a good result. And the last example is also looks impressive. Yeah. So you might be getting really good results for your task 2 with the help of ChatGPT or by practicing a lot, but when it comes to task 1, this is what's stopping you. Now, to be able to write effective overviews or really good overviews, you guys need to be able to differentiate between trend charts and compare charts. Trend charts are called trend charts because they show a change over a period of time. For example, in your graph, you might be given different categories and how they change over a certain time period. For example, you might have like 2, 3, 4 categories, and their difference, their change over a period of time. For example, in this line graph, you can see that we have 4 different countries, and their changes from 1990 to 2012. Right? And you are able to use increase or decrease vocabulary for trend charts. Similarly, in this bar chart, we can see 3 different time periods, 2007, 2008, and 2009. Right? That means that you are also able to use increase or decrease vocabulary. But in compare charts, you only have one time period, 1 year, or no time period at all. So that's why they're called compare charts. Of course, you might ask me a question, Mr. Alisher. In trend charts, you also show comparisons. Why are you not calling them compare charts? That's a good question. I mean, that's a simple name. The name is just accepted that it's a compare chart. That's why it's a compare chart. So as long as you understand the differences between these 2 types of graphs, then you should be able to differentiate them and produce a good work. Moving on to further examples. This is an example of a bar chart, which is a trend chart, because you can see 3 different categories, men, women, and children, and their change over a period of time from 2001 to 2008. And we have a pie chart. We have 2 different time periods here, 1997, 2008. You might ask me a question again, but we are comparing here 1997 and 2007, right? Like I said, you need to show comparisons in any kind of graph, comparisons and contrasts. But here, as long as we are able to use increase or decrease language, increase or decrease vocabulary, we call them trend charts, not compare charts. In compare charts, you only have one time period or no time period at all. You need to understand this primary difference. To explain you further, I want you to draw your attention to this bar chart. You can see 3 different categories here: interpreters, translators, and language teachers. So the graph shows us how much income annually they get in US dollars in 5 cities. If you look at the trend chart, you will be able to connect the blue categories or interpreter categories with each other and construct a line graph, right? But in this case, you cannot say the salary of interpreters increased from Mexico to Dubai, or from Dubai to Paris, or from Paris to Munich, or from Munich to Toronto, because it doesn't really make sense, right? So yes, that's why it's called the compare chart. And here we simply show what are the biggest changes, what are the biggest categories, what are the smallest categories, etc. Okay, I hope so far so good. Moving on to this one. This bar chart also shows 2 different categories, males and females, right, in the year 2000 only. in the year 2000. It shows estimated world illiteracy rates by region and by gender in the year 2000. So we got only one year, the year 2000, and our job is to compare males with females and their proportions in different regions of the world. So, right, you cannot really say the proportion of illiteracy among males increased or the proportion of illiteracy among females increased in this case, because it would simply not make sense. Another example here, the table shows languages with the most native speakers. So we have 3 different categories: the total number of speakers, languages, 4 different categories: languages, total number of speakers, native speakers, and the number of speakers as an additional language. Our job is to talk about the primary features, key features, and then summarize by selecting and reporting the main features, right? So it was an example of a compare chart. Yes, I need to tell you that each task is unique. It means that what works for one graph might not work for the next. So you need to be extremely, extremely careful, right? However, there are some common ways, or I would say methods or measures that you can apply to trend charts when you're writing overviews. So you can probably screenshot or keep it for yourself. Yes, there are 4 things you must talk about or should talk about. I would not say must, but should talk about in trend chart overviews. Examiners definitely expect you to talk about increases and decreases. So whenever you have a trend chart, you must talk about increases and decreases. If you don't, you are risking your task achievement score, and you might end up with a very bad result, with a very low result, such as task achievement band 5 or band 4. And you should talk about the highest and lowest categories if they are provided to you. I said here, be careful. Why? Because when you are describing line charts, you might not always have the lowest, or you might not always have the highest. So you need to be really careful with your language. For example, let's go to this line graph. If you look at India, or let's look at Japan, that's clear. Many students might say, okay, so Japan showed the highest proportion throughout the period, or over the period. But if you look at here, it starts as the highest, and it remains the highest until the year of about 2007, 2008, right? But after this year, it is overtaken by India. So that means that your description is incorrect, because you said that that's over the entire period, when in fact, it's not over the entire period. Or when you say, oh, that was not India, that was China. When you say India was the lowest category over the period, or was the lowest category in general, you are making a mistake. Because why? In the year 2010, it was not the lowest category. The figure for the US was lowest in 2010. So you should be really careful with the language you are choosing. Instead, what you might do is say for most of the period, right? Or for or show exceptions, except for a certain year or for a certain period, or say until, if it's a decent key feature, right? So moving on to suggestions for the overview. In the third point, you should talk about the most notable or significant changes. It is important to talk about the most significant changes because they catch your attention. Normally, when I'm explaining my students to write overviews, I asked them to imagine themselves on top of a mountain or on top of a high hill, where so when they are overlooking, when they're looking down, they can see some details, right? And their job is to summarize them. For example, and you also need to know that in the overview part, you're not talking about specific features. For example, you cannot say 50% or 80% or 50 kilograms, 1,000 kilometers. That's not really possible, because overviews should contain only main and general pieces of information. And in the fourth point, we have any other key features. In this part, like I said, each task is unique, and there may be some unusual features related to tasks, to a certain task. So further in the lecture, we will look at some examples. So let's look at this chart together. The chart below shows the number of films produced, the number of films 5 countries produced. There's a mistake in the description, I believe. 5 countries produced in 3 years. Because we have 3 years, 2007, 2008, and 2009, it is going to be categorized as a trend chart. So when you look at the task, by the way, I need to tell you that this was my real exam task from 2023. I found it on the internet. If you look at it, the first thing you notice is the category A and category B, or country A and country B. Why? Because they produce significantly more films than countries C, D, E, right? It immediately catches your attention. So I think that sentence, so that's going to be the first sentence I'm going to point out, because this is what catches my attention immediately. And it's going to be regarded as the fourth feature, any other key features, right? It's not increase or decrease. It's not highest, lowest. I haven't talked about them yet. And it's not the most notable change. The most notable change I'm referring to over a period of time. I'm going to show you as an example. So in general, countries A and B released significantly more films compared with the other 3 nations. I mean CDE by other 3 nations. So next sentence. While the number of films produced by countries B, C, and E showed an upward trend over the period, the reverse was true for countries A and D. So like I said, you should talk about increases and decreases, which is the first point in my blueprint here. Increases and decreases mentioned. It is also apparent that the most significant growth was observed in country B. You can see that country B from the year 2007, 2008 to 2009, it showed the biggest change. Country A's change not that significant. Country C not as big as country B. Neither D and E countries showed as big of a change as country B. So it is quite a significant feature, so it must be mentioned. But it was country A that had the highest figure in each year. So country A, if you can see, 2008 highest, 2007 highest, 2008 highest, 2009 also highest. In each year, it showed the biggest figures. So, yes. And then ask yourself a question. Did I talk about all of these? Did I talk about increases and decreases? You say yes, put a tick. Did you talk about the highest and lowest categories? I talked about highest, but I did not talk about the lowest, because it's not, in this case, possible to talk about the lowest figure. What do you mean by this? Let's take a look. In 2007, among blue bars, which one is the lowest? Country C is the lowest. In 2008, among red bars, which one is the lowest? Country D is the lowest. In 2009, which one is the lowest? E is the lowest among dark gray bars. So you see, the lowest is changing from year to year. That means that it's not really significant to talk about the lowest. Okay, moving on. Another example here. The charts below show, again, there's a mistake in the introduction part, the percentage of water used in different sectors in Sydney, Australia in 1997 and 2007. So we have the percentage of total water use in two different years, 1997 and 2007. If you pay attention, so the biggest category in the first year, 1997, was food, with 48%. Identify the lowest now, 5%, which is building. 2007, again, food industry dominates in this year, in the second year, despite decrease. So that's 48, that's 41, there's a slight decrease, but again, food is the dominant category in here. What about building? Again, similarity. You see, building is the lowest here as well. So I noticed something. Food is the biggest. Building is the smallest in both years. What about other categories? Service, 13, 25. It almost doubled. Household use, 19 to 21. Slight increase. Manufacturing, decrease. So I should talk about increases and decreases, highest, lowest categories, the most significant changes, and any other piece of data which are significant. For example, overall, the food industry was the leading water consumer in both years, whereas the building industry utilized the lowest proportion of water. Like I said, I am going to start with the key feature that attracts my attention most. So at the first glance, like as soon as you look at the pie charts here, you notice that food is the biggest. So this should be your starting point immediately. Moving on, although the food, manufacturing, and building industries experienced a decline, the reverse was true for the household and service sectors. So this sentence is about increases and decreases. Because it's a trend chart, you should talk about increases and decreases. If you don't, you would make a mistake. Notably, the most significant proportional change was noted in the service sector. So looking at the service sector, we can see that it had 13%. It showed 13% in 1997. In 2007, it almost doubled, reaching 25%, which is a quarter. That means that compared to other categories, it showed the biggest change, which should be mentioned. I did not notice any other key features. So yeah, that should be enough for the overview. Now, next example. So I try to include as many graphs as possible because I want the lesson to be more practical, right? I did not only want to focus only on one or two graph types because that would not be sufficient, because in the exam, since we moved to CDI, you guys really cannot really predict or cannot really know what kind of graph you will be provided in the exam. Now, this one is a bar chart. It shows skilled migrants to Australia from 2009 to 2012. So we got 4 different time periods. If we have 4 different time periods, that means that it is a trend chart again. So we got accountants, cooks, software engineers, and computer programmers. If you pay attention, so what many students see is the fact that accountants, in this case, in the year 2010, they like show a very high figure. Yes, but yeah, in fact, in each year, they show the highest figures, in each year. However, if you look at all other categories, you can see that they are showing fluctuations. They are showing big changes, all of them over the period. it should be mentioned because it is something that it applies to all the categories. So overall, despite all categories seeing mild fluctuations, that's not a wild fluctuation, that's a mild fluctuation because not all of them are changing significantly. Mild fluctuations. The number of accountants and computer programmers experienced the modest increase over the year. I need to tell you one more thing. Some candidates might make a mistake by saying that the number of accountants, or that's the number of accountants, decreased, because what they do is they look at the year 2010 and the last year. So they believe that it's a decrease. However, it's a misguided approach. That's the incorrect approach. What you should do is you need to look at the first year, the initial year, and the last year. What happens in the middle is not that important for us when we are writing our increases and decreases sentences. In the first year, that's 20,000. In the last year, that's about 22,000. So that's a slight increase. Cooks. You see, they're fluctuating, but the beginning, in the first number, initial number count is smaller, bigger than the last count. That means it's a decline. This category showed a decline. The same applies to software engineers, but computer programmers showed an increase. Generally speaking, that's an increase. So you should look at the first year and the last year. Whereas the reverse was true for cooks and software engineers. Cooks and software engineers showed a decline. Notably, among the professions, accountants registered the highest immigrant population. The highest immigrant population. But computer programmers constituted a significantly smaller quantity. I talked about highest and lowest categories in this case. What I could talk about is a significant change shown by accountants, right? That's missing from the overview. For compare charts, you follow almost the same approach, with the exception of the fact that you cannot talk about increases and decreases here because they are compare charts. So here, you should talk about highest and lowest points. It's a must. It's a must to talk about highest and lowest points. And then most notable changes or differences. In this case, we should also look at the differences between categories as well. And any other important key features, if any. Let's take a look at some examples. Now, the graph below shows the average daily sales of selected food items at the Brisk Cafe by season. So we have a cafe called Brisk and average daily sales. It shows the number of servings. We have two different seasons, winter and summer. So blue represents winter, orange represents summer. So hot coffee in winter, sales highest. In the summertime, that's not bad. That's the second place. Iced coffee, almost no sales in winter. In the summertime, the biggest selling item. Ice cream, wintertime, low sales. Summertime, second highest. Soup, number 2 in winter. Summertime, not bad. Salad, the same. Salad sales are the same. So if you look at winter, among all the winter categories, among the blue bars, which one is the biggest category? That's hot coffee. Which one is the lowest? That's iced coffee. In the summertime, which one is the biggest category? That's iced coffee. Which one is the lowest? You say soup and salad, teacher. So your first sentence should be about that. Overall, the winter season shows a greater sales variation across food items than the summer season. What I mean by this sentence is, you see, the variation, the difference between categories in this case is way bigger in the winter time than in the summer. So yeah, I talked about this. While hot coffee and soup are the most sold items in winter, hot coffee and soup, cold products, including iced coffee and ice cream, are most popular in summer. Popular in this case means liked and supported. So the definition of popular, according to the dictionary, is liked and supported by many people. So if they like, they purchase. I'm referring to high sales. By contrast, the demand for iced coffee is lowest in winter, whereas by that for, I mean the demand for. So that's an example of referencing and substitution, which is in cohesion aspect. That for soup and salad is lowest in summer. Some people might also talk about salad sales being the same no matter the season. That's optional, I would say. If you want, you can talk about salad here, or you can omit it. That's not really, that's quite optional. Now, when candidates see graphs, diagrams, or tables with so much data, they get frustrated because there is a lot of things to talk about. However, if you try to analyze and understand the graph, you notice that it actually is not as scary as it seems. For example, earlier I showed you this task as a complete chart, and now I have an example prepared for you to look at it. So we have languages, 6 different languages, and we have the number of speakers. Because it's a compare chart, not a trend chart, plus we don't have a time period, that means that you need to stick to present simple when you are describing the table. If you look at the number of native speakers, the first category, you can see that the biggest category is Mandarin Chinese. But the lowest one is Portuguese. So Portuguese is spoken by the least number of people. Mandarin Chinese is spoken by the highest number of people. Number of speakers as an additional language. There's a spelling mistake in the word additional. Should be fixed. So additional language. The highest figure belongs to English here with 603 million. Well, but lowest, that's Portuguese again. The total number of speakers, Mandarin Chinese again, is the leading language here with just over 1 billion people. 1,000 million, it means it's 1 billion. And the lowest category here is Portuguese. So we noticed a pattern. Portuguese is the lowest throughout the categories, across all the categories. That's important to mention. Mandarin Chinese, it was the highest category in the number of native speakers and the total number of speakers. It should be mentioned. But when it comes to English, it is the leading category in terms of speakers as an additional language. So yes, let's look at the points. Overall, Mandarin Chinese has the highest number of total speakers and natives. By the way, when you have the total, it is important that you start with the total. You should start with the total figure or total category as the highest number of total speakers and natives. Whereas Portuguese is spoken by the least number of people across all the categories given. So I focused on the highest and the lowest now. Lowest of all categories has been mentioned. Highest has been mentioned only in terms of native speakers and total number of speakers. Meanwhile, English is a notable exception in the chart. In that means because. So it's a good expression you can use in your overviews or in your writing. In that it is the only language where the count of users as an extra language exceeds the count of users. There's a mistake I noticed here. Exceeds that of natives. By that of, I'm using referencing and substitution here again. You might ask me a question. Okay, what about other figures like Hindi and Spanish or Arabic? They are not as significant as Mandarin Chinese, English, and Portuguese in this situation because their figures are moderate. However, in the overview, we should focus on the most important pieces of information or extremes. Nice. I have prepared further examples for you. So this one shows, okay, let's focus on this one in more detail. The bar chart shows estimated world illiteracy rates by region and by gender. So, and plus we have the time period in the past, so you should stick to past simple when you are describing the chart. We got males and females and 6 different parts of the world. So the first thing that immediately catches your attention is the fact that 3 regions, Africa, Arab states, and South Asia, have significantly higher proportions or rates of illiteracy for both genders compared to the remaining 3. So this should be your starting point. And you look by gender among females. Among females, the biggest is, or compare males with females with each other. Females have a bigger rate of illiteracy in all given areas than males. That's quite significant. What about the highest figures now across regions? The highest one is in South Asia, whereas the lowest illiteracy rates are in developed countries. Okay, what about the biggest changes? The biggest change was noticed in Arab states, I believe. The biggest difference, not change, but difference among males and females. So, overall, Sub-Saharan Africa, Arab states, and South Asia demonstrated markedly higher, markedly means noticeably, higher rates of illiteracy compared with the other regions studied. Across all the areas, the rate of female illiteracy was greater than that of males. Than that of males. Then that of is referring to then the rate of males. That's referencing and substitution. With the most significant gender gap existing in Arab states. Gender gap. So I'm referring to the most noticeable difference. Notably, while South Asia registered the highest figures for both genders, the reverse was observed in the developed world. Developed world, the developing country. By the reverse, I am referring to the lowest figures. The lowest figures for both genders. Now, this is, okay, so this is the last task. I believe you can take a screenshot or you can read it on your own, because I followed pretty much the same strategy, the same formula when it comes to approaching overviews. Okay? So, yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Just a quick recap for trend charts. You must talk about increases and decreases, highest and the lowest categories, but you should be careful not to provide any correct piece of information, because if you do so, you would be awarded a band 5 or 4, which would be quite frustrating. And the third place, talk about the most notable changes, and if any, talk about other key features. For compare charts, you should talk about highest and lowest points. It's a must. 2, most notable change or difference. It's important. And, if any, other important key features. Right. So, I hope today's lesson was quite useful to you, and you learned how to approach overviews better, and try to practice using these suggestions more, and use ChatGPT to get feedback on your work. And yeah, I hope it was quite insightful for you. I wish you the best of luck. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.